This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
Want to get right into the chapter?
Yeah, let's go talk about some oaths.
Chapter 11, an oath, and the symbol is the faces. The black Aja face.
Mm-hmm.
The two faces. Yeah, there's a lot of two-faced stuff going on here. A lot of lies.
A lot of pairs of women. The theme of pairs of Aes Sedai getting into various kinds of trouble is persistent for many of the chapters in this section.
I do notice that he often likes to pair two Aes Sedai together. I've always wondered why. Maybe it just helps him play them off each other. You've got Romaine, you've got Adelius and Vandene, you've got Theodrin and Phelan, you've got, like...
Nicola and Irena, granted Irena's on Aes Sedai. And then you've got Morel and Nisao in this chapter.
Suan and Leanne.
Nynaeve and Elaine. I mean, there's just a lot of pairs.
And then Egwene. And her ego.
There was Egwene and Aviendha.
That's true. She did. Aviendha was pulled away.
And Aviendha also doesn't really have much of a companion beyond her ego.
Well, maybe it's a symbol of why Egwene is so vulnerable to being influenced by Halima.
Because she doesn't have a buddy.
She doesn't have a buddy.
Buddy system. Everyone should follow the buddy system.
It's like in Among Us. You always want to follow someone around, and then if one of you dies, you know the other one's the imposter.
I have not played this game in the slightest, so I will take your word for it.
It's all the rage with kids these days. Come
I
on.
know, and I have deliberately held on to my curmudgeon status and yelled at them to get off my lawn on purpose. Chapter 11, an oath. You asked to be wakened before the sun, mother. Egwene's eyes popped open. She had set herself a time to wake only moments from now, and despite herself, she started back against her pillow from the face above her. Stern through a sheen of perspiration, it was not a pleasant sight first thing in the morning. Mary's manner was perfectly respectful, but a pinched nose, a permanently downturned mouth, and dark eyes sharp with censure said she had never seen anyone half as good as they should be or pretended to be, and her flat tone turned every meaning head to heels. It's pretty much all you ever get to know about Mary.
Mary's not very Mary.
No, she does her best and sucks at it.
Yeah.
Like, that's her entire arc.
And then she dies. I have to wonder if maybe the reason Jordan is putting her so up front is just so that we'll miss her when she's gone. We'll be like, wait, somebody kill her? What happened? Like, that's the only thing, because, like, otherwise it's just wasted. It seems like a lot of time on a nothing burger.
I think it's to help obfuscate Halima.
Right.
But, yeah, it feels like a lot of waste. And there's paragraphs of just this, like, comedy of how terrible Mary is at her job. And it's just like, so that I'll be sad when she dies. I'm not sad when she dies. I'm like, yay, out of the plot. Thank you.
I want to make Mary and Selene, or whatever her name is.
Yeah,
Serena.
Selene. Yeah.
Yeah, the other one of the...
Yeah.
I mean, they're there because they are signed by Romaine, you know?
Right.
And...
Well, if Romaine gets combined, we only need one spy.
Smerry.
Smerry. Yeah.
They do have to die because I think you have to give... Romaine needs a source of information about Egwene, and that's how you get Phelan and Theodrin to act as spies, like double agents.
Because they both reject those offers?
So Egwene sends Theodrin and Phelan to go spy on Ramonda and Lelaine.
Because they had offered to take them in.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, fuck you. And then Egwene's like, okay, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but actually totally go take that offer.
Exactly. And be a double agent for me.
And she does that with Swan as well. She sends Swan to Lelaine to the same ends. So yeah. But yeah, it's a lot of pages for obfuscation that really doesn't need to happen. Like, it needs to happen from where they're sitting in the plot, obviously. You're throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks, but, like, this stuff doesn't stick.
Basically, what's happened is the camp has come to a halt, and they're doing a day of repairs before they get back on the road again.
Yes, one day.
One day.
Very
and they
aggressively.
do get back on the road again. Not for very long, though. The next time we see Egwene in the Path of Daggers, the camp has stopped again for a month, and then at the end of that, they travel to the White Tower.
Yeah, and that is after they negotiate with the Mirandian and Andoran nobles to stay there, and that gets hinted at in this. They're 10 days away from the location where that happens.
Gotcha. Yeah. So we're very close to, there's a stop, 10 days, negotiations, a month, and then they travel to the White Tower.
Yeah.
So we are 5 weeks away from traveling to the White Tower, which doesn't happen until, I mean, not after Winter's Heart. It happens
after the snows come.
After the snows come.
Everything is dry as hell right now, and they are wading through hip-deep snow when the siege starts.
So just for timeline's sake, we have 4 more books to happen in the next 5 weeks in timeline.
Wow.
Storyline. Which just tells you how compressed the timeline is. That seems like such a, that's a lot of pages between then and now. That's all I'm going to say.
Books of pages.
Books of pages.
Yeah,
and so this is where I do think that some people started to complain about the slog, which I don't like to bring up too often, but this is what it is, where...
This is the off-ramp from the interstate towards the slog.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
It's not actually slogging yet, but, we're setting up why the slog isn't a slog, basically. But yeah, this is just... They haven't worked that out yet at all. At this point, it's like, well, we're going to keep walking until we figure out what we're doing. Egwene's still trying to think, if we stopped, for how long, what would that mean? She's still got a lot of unknowns in this equation.
And we see some of that brainstorming with Gareth Brent.
Which lets you know that she has no idea what she's going to be doing in 5 weeks. She's like, I did something siege.
Well, and then there's a question. She could gateway at any time. Right, she knows that. So she's trying to figure out at what point in the march do you just shortcut it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then combine that with trying to take power.
Right, yeah. And she can't make a gateway big enough for the whole army. She needs several other Aes Sedai, so you have to find a spot, you have to convince them to do it. There's a lot to organize first. And she needs a place to stop, and that's what the Mirandian border is really going to offer them.
So there's a lot of things coming together to try and, she kind of knows where she's going, but there's just a lot of moving parts right now that she's sorting through.
Yeah, and trying to sort out her allies, and she gets a lot of allies in this chapter that make it possible for her to start leveraging the hall and to doing things.
And that's really what these chapters are, is sort of her moving pieces into place to take the Amyrlin seat, to take the White Tower.
Right.
This is the first steps of her reuniting the tower.
Yeah.
Which is vital to happen before the last battle.
And I think that really starts with Theodrin and Phelan. That's the first thing that breaks her way and starts everything. Because no sister's ever sworn fealty to the Amyrlin before. And these two, who are unusual, almost as unusual as her, choose to do that. And by the end of the day, she's got 2 regular Aes Sedai who have sworn fealty. That,
and I would say last night's dressing down of Shiriam went surprisingly well.
Yeah, totally. So Theodrin and Phelan come in and mention Halima repeatedly, just in case you're any confusion about what happened with Moghedien. Just in case you forgot. Talk about Tiana not treating them like Aes Sedai. And then here's the chair. I was noticing the chair the whole way through this chapter.
Yeah, based on our discussion last time where I said, because the chair is her, now that they're on the move, it's an unstable base of support. It keeps falling over on her, and she's not really sure what she's doing or where she is.
And these two come in. She doesn't know what they want, and the chair is, uncertain, and she has to reach down and pull the legs straight. And that's basically what happens verbally, is she, reaches out and, puts them straight.
Yep.
And then she's got a more stable seat.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's just, I love those little analogies that he puts in there. The Amyrlin seat is unstable.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I wanted to reemphasize, though, you kind of blew past the fact that Halima was spotted outside the tent. That is the person who freed Moghedien. This is sort of the big drop that and we've seen from her POV. It's come on, Elaine.
Yeah.
You were looking for the person who did it. Why is it so mind-blowing? Why can you not bend your mind around the fact that Halima might not be what she seems?
Because Halima is in her head.
Oh, right. Yeah, that.
Yeah, there's so much at the end of the chapter where it's just Halima is in your head, Egwene. You are such a strong-willed person. You can dream so strongly. How do you not realize that this person is in your head? But yeah, Egwene's oh, only Halima. Too bad there's just a shadow of a hazard of it's a pity that they had not found a witness. The rescue would remain a shadow half glimpsed. Halima waltzed by and pissed off everybody. Talk about half glimpse. Everyone couldn't tear their eyes off of her.
They got a full glimpse, yeah. So, and during that whole confrontation, there's this note under the thing that it kind of builds tension, but it's just a nothing note from Suan saying, I didn't find anything in the dream last night. So I was like, oh, what's the note say? What's the note say? And then I got to it and I was like, oh, nothing.
Yeah, I was like, is there like some symbol with the note, like with the chair? No. It's, in a way it is. It's Swan's constant suspicion and puzzle seeking that doesn't always turn something up, right? It gives you a sense of rising tension to parallel Egwene's, but that's literally all it is. With this scene, even though I know how it goes, every time it starts out with Balin wanting to talk to Egwene and Theoden being like, this isn't the time to bother the Amyrlin, every time it's like, is this going to be Nicola and Arena?
Yep.
Like, is that what we're about to do? And then it isn't, but it's just...
It's a very similar setup. Yep.
Oh, don't bother her.
And this is also why I can never keep Nicola and Arena separate from Phelan and Theodrin. I always get those two mixed up because... these scenes are presented in exactly the same way, and I have trouble remembering which one leads to blackmail and which one leads to fealty.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think I've got it now, because we covered it in the podcast. You know, it's one of those things that, like, once we do it in the podcast, it usually sticks. But before this point, usually, not always, but before this point, I was just like, wait, which one's which? And then you also have the other Phelan. Phalion, yes. Who's the Black Sister, who I always got Phalion and Phelan confused. And they're not the same. No. So, for the longest time, I thought those two were the same characters, and I thought this Phelan was Phalion, whatever.
Right.
And I thought this one was a Black Sister swearing fealty to her to get in close. And, like, I was convinced. I was absolutely convinced that this was a Black Sister swearing to get close to her. And that's all. Especially here where she says only a Black Sister would break an oath like that. I'm like, oh... irony, because she clearly is. Mm-hmm. Nope, just me being wrong and confusing names.
Well, I mean, in fairness, they're virtually the same name. So, the name Salad.
And virtually the same character.
Yeah.
Unpleasant Red Sister. Or unpleasant, Aes Sedai.
Yeah. Neither, I can't remember what Aja Phalion was from.
I'm pretty sure she's red.
Really?
Yeah.
Phalion isn't.
No, she had to beg to be admitted to her Aja.
Right, which would not have happened in Salidar, because... I mean, it wouldn't have been red in Salidar, because obviously.
And she is blue.
Such a hard time imagining her as a blue. I mean, Egwene even pegs her as being a likely target for the red.
That's true.
I guess it's because conviction is kind of the theme with both of those. The blue is, they're convicted about something. The reds are convicted about a very specific thing. So, like,
right.
They're so opposite that they're almost the same. They're almost indistinguishable sometimes.
Well, and you see Phelan's conviction here, where she's, like, willing to step forward, and even though I fucking hate your guts, and she says that, which is not always the brightest thing to say, even if you do hate somebody, don't say it to them. Even though I fucking hate your guts, I'm willing to step forward and work for the cause that I believe in, which is that you are the legit Amyrlin seat. And
even before Egwene was in the mix, she left the tower not because an Aes Sedai swooped her up, but because she disagreed with what was happening with the coup. She chose, as far as I can tell. She was just like, woke up one morning and was like, that's not cool, and left. You know, we always get this idea that the novices and accepted were just taken away by the Aes Sedai, but, like, I think a lot of them made the choice on their own. And I bet Phelan and Theodrin made the choice together because they're good friends.
How good?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't actually sense chemistry between them. I think that they're just... like, you know, like when you're in a class with someone and you end up feeling almost like siblings with them because you've just gone through so much crap. That's more like the vibe I get from them.
Lab partners.
Yeah, totally. You saved me from almost pouring sulfuric acid all over myself that one time. We're good.
You may be a dick, but you know your chemistry.
Right, so you can't ship every single pair. I mean, you can, but you can't be right about all of them. But these two, I've never gotten much beyond, like, professional vibes from them. But really good. For some reason, there's something about them that nobody else sees that they really enjoy about each other.
Agreed. And then we get to a slight discussion of the Three Oaths, which I agree with Egwene here. She's later talked out of it, but I think the Three Oaths hurt more than they help.
Agreed.
In a lot of
I was
situations.
really disappointed when she fell back into, yes, this is what makes us Aes Sedai. I was like, oh, come on, Egwene, you were so close. You made so many good arguments. Like, I get the idea of, like, an oath of office for a particular title, but the whole, like, we are less than unless we swear these stupid oaths is just like, no, you were right the first time that you said it was bad.
All that binding Aes Sedai to these oaths have done is it doesn't help. It hasn't stopped the Black Ajah from infiltrating, and they can all lie. And so you have all these people running around who are Aes Sedai, who are capable of lying, capable of murdering, who did a lot of murder with the power, and it's just like, yeah, no wonder nobody believed you.
Yeah. Yeah.
No wonder the White Cloaks have legit reasons for saying, hey, Aes Sedai can lie and murder. Like, they probably saw some Black Hotjaw doing that shit. Because I guarantee, there was a confrontation between someone with the Black Hotjaw and a White Cloak. The person with the Black Hotjaw just went ahead and were like, oh, I'm in danger, and killed the White Cloaks. The White Cloaks perfectly accurately say that Aes Sedai is a Dark Friend.
Yeah.
And that only serves the Dark One to have the White Cloaks and the Aes Sedai at each other's throats.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
yeah, I very much agree with all the arguments here because, like, I have learned so much about lying from studying Aes Sedai. So much. Like, no, you can't take an oath for truthfulness and then have the entire audience learn how to lie better with it and then still claim that the oaths are useful. No.
Natural selection for better liars, basically.
Yeah.
Faelane offers to do a penance, which the proper balance between pride and humility feels a lot like the proper difference between honor and obligation. This feels like ji'e'toh to me.
Totally is. It's Aes Sedai ji'e'toh.
And I'm willing to bet that the honor system, the pride and humility aspect, and the ji'e'toh aspect have a common, right? Because the Aiel were servants of the Aes Sedai.
Oh my god, totally!
So there's probably a similar culture root to Aes Sedai doing penance and Aiel doing penance. I mean, there seems to be for honor and for respect.
Yeah, there's a sense of balance that has to be maintained, which is a very Age of Legends concept, right?
Right.
The sense of obligation to the world is carried in servants of all.
Right.
So yeah, like this fundamental philosophy.
This is what makes them Aes Sedai. What makes Aiel, they follow ji'e'toh.
It's not their fighting skills, it's not their genetics, it's their honor code with Aes Sedai.
It's not the 3 oaths. She's so close here to realizing this is what makes Aes Sedai, not the 3 oaths.
Yeah, and I mean, even in the next chapter, she blends the two like a goddamn master when she handles Morel and Nisao. I did my notes for both chapters all in one go, so I'm like, wait, right, there is a chapter break there. But like you're saying, she's so close. She's actively melding the two systems in a really productive way.
And this is where I think this is something that Sanderson missed on in the last 3 books. Because I think Jordan was building up to it, but I really do think this is one where he went back to the conservative way. He went back to the old way of the 3 oaths, the old way of Codswain, the old way of, that like he didn't break apart the structure of the White Tower that I think Jordan would have at the end of the series.
Yeah,
Sanderson went back to an old familiar White Tower.
I agree. I'm not sure that RJ would have continued on to the end, because it makes a lot of sense with Egwene's arc in melding with the tower again. She really, like with Sylviana, that whole thing, I feel like that really pulls her back towards a more conservative, old-school way of looking at the Aes Sedai. So I don't know that she would have managed to not whiff this, even in Jordan's hands.
I have to take a better look at Book 11 to see where she was going at that point.
Yeah, I feel like it's consistent to Egwene's character to step back and fuck that up at the end. But yeah, the way that it happened under Sanderson feels like it would have been a much closer thing under Jordan's hands.
Yeah.
And yeah, as we get through Book 11, we'll be able to parse that out better.
And also not killing Egwene, which Sanderson made that choice.
Mm-hmm, right, yeah.
But if she'd stuck around, maybe some of these sort of reforms could have happened post last battle.
Yeah, like in the decades of negotiating with the kin, what that organization is going to look like. There could have been some huge discussions without the pressures of the last battle breathing down everyone's necks. Oh, I wanted to point out this line that she says to them in this Oathraw discussion. Bad enough you have to face that nonsense without parodying it yourselves. Because, oh my god, how many things in this world do we disagree with and then internalize and beat ourselves up with? Yeah,
negative self, internal talk, please.
Yeah, or just like internalized misogyny in women, internalized racism in all races. It's like that line is just like, yes, you in your own head can at least try decolonize your mind, right? We are all colonized. So like this is it's a great argument for that. To have some agency. If you don't accept it, then don't accept it. For real.
Spend some time thinking about your thoughts. Reflect on what you're thinking and why you're thinking that. And that I think is what meditation really is.
Can be, yeah.
Can be. It's like, it can help you get in that mode where you're not thinking your thoughts, you're thinking about why you think your thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Or why go to therapy? If you have to actually explain your thought process to someone else, if you have to sit with something that came out of your mouth you didn't know you were thinking, that can be, or journaling. Journaling is another great place to be like, oh.
But that's why a therapist is really just someone who sits there and says, so why do you think that? Because it just makes you observe yourself, like makes you really, observe your own thoughts. And it's also a skeptic tactic. If you're a skeptic and really want to make sure that you're not like believing bullshit, think about why you have those opinions. Think about why you have those thoughts, right? Why do you think vaccines have 5G chips in them? Is it because you believe that, or is it because you don't want to get a vaccine and you don't like needles?
Right, yeah, like check your implicit biases because they will lead to explicit choices.
Another way of saying that, definitely.
Yeah, just think about it. Think about your thinking.
Think about your thinking. And Egwene is brilliant to sort of have come to realize that at this age.
It feels very much like Soralia is coming out through Egwene in that moment.
This feels like very Aiel training being translated into, and that I think is probably her number one asset, is that she can take the Aiel training that none of these women have seen before and sort of project that forward as a leadership style. And it's this new, unique, interesting leadership style that like comes out of nowhere. And that's why you go abroad and study with new people. Yeah,
seriously, and then you can code switch between radically different systems and make magic in the alchemy.
I have Suan saying there's nothing in the dream.
So helpful.
And that's the one real argument that they don't fake between her and Leanne, is the fact that Suan can't keep her temper and lost access to one of the Dream Ter'angreal, and so now they have to take turns instead of both being in the dream every night.
Yeah, I like that they do have a real bone of contention.
Oh yeah, all friends should.
And, like, they're professionals who have been working this for so long. Like, just going through trial by fire doesn't erase, like, long-standing. Like, you're still who you are.
I don't want to tell you how many times I've been cooking on the line with somebody who I respect and I think is a wonderful cook, and we're working really well together. Damn it, I hate the way they flip their buns, or like I hate like there's one little thing they do. It's like I hate the way that they pre-plate their food or something like that. And I'm just like, fuck you, asshole. And they're like, nope, that's the way I'm doing it. I'm like, it doesn't help me, and we get, it's just, you work together with somebody and...
Yeah, I mean, presumably Lyanna and Swan had similar, like, you never put the pens back where I normally leave them, or some, like, office place irritation, Right.
Stop eating my lunch, my name was on that.
Right? Or, like, Leanne probably, like, knocked on the door in a way that just really got Swan's goat.
Leanne used to chew with her mouth open.
Something,
yeah, totally.
It makes their relationship a little more believable that, like, that little bickery.
Yeah, as long as it's not too much.
It doesn't get in the way. It's not like Romaine, like, self-destructing every single strategic opportunity ever. It's just a little annoyance.
It's one of the things that I think really makes Jordan's relationship special, is that people don't just become friends and they're great friends forever and ever and they never have any problems again. Like, these friendships go through shit and they get in arguments and they don't support each other. Don't always support each other when they should. And yet they still come back and are still friends and still believe in each other and are still friendly.
Yeah, because he has the entire world built up so much that he can imagine that entire subplot and then just toss in a throwaway line to let you know about something he probably spent like at least a whole evening like just daydreaming, like, what is their relationship like? And then he pops in one little half line. Just, there you go.
Yeah. Well, the line has always been, if they have a name, they have a backstory.
Yeah, and it shows in things like this where these tertiary characters have an entire arc of baggage that just barely shows up. And the next thing I have is about the Blue Spy Master going up against Swan and losing.
And being pissed for good reason. Like, the fact that Swan revealed who the Spy Master was is pretty upset. Like, she should have known better than that.
She was in a desperate place. She was a stilled woman trying to maintain relevance. Like, nothing was sacred at that point.
And that woman was gone from the camp. So it was like, hey, the Spy Master isn't here. I know that. Right.
As the information was going back to the tower, right? Like, it made sense, but also, like, Seb and Balwer would not accept excuses either. Right?
No. The number of spy networks we have in this book is just wonderful. I don't know. That's something we never really talk about, is, like, everybody here is making money spying.
I know, right? Like, there's more spies than there are just innocent people. Like,
it's like, screw black friends. I'm more worried about the spies, our dark friends.
Black Aja and dark friends.
Yeah.
I saw that happen.
But yeah, everyone's just gonna... And then there's that one guy, I think it's like Master Nori, has like a pigeon. Not Master Nori.
He starts a spy network once Elaine gets back, and it's really cute because he's like trying. He's like, oh, I can do spy master stuff. It's like, okay.
There is a guy who works for the Brown Aja, though, who sends pigeons back to the tower.
Yeah,
and...
I think that's who... Forkroot scene.
Yes.
And she sends reports to Narenwin Barta. And yeah, there's some dude with pigeons in that town. There's a librarian in Camelin who is a Brown spy.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to talk about.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Does he have pigeons? Or is he just librarian? What's her face that gets stabbed is trying to get in contact with when she gets stabbed.
Milam Honder, a Brown agent and a second librarian in the Royal Palace of Camelin. He is also one of Demira's personal agents and has been for 30 years.
Ah, so it's a personal agent, not even an Aja agent. Personal sister's agent.
He's an agent for Demira. She goes to meet him. She gets stabbed, so we don't see him at that point. But we do know that he's a spy for the Brown, and we do know that 3 of the Brown Aja sisters staying at the Silver Swan go and visit him to send pigeons. So that connects the Silver... That's how I was trying to track down, like, who are those sisters at the Silver Swan in the last chapter?
Yeah.
And the only connection I have is to this guy, who's also connected to Demira.
And then Rena Hartford does discover him when she's rooting out every single spy because she's a badass. But it makes sense, honestly, that even if Demira thinks of him as her personal agent, like, it's a librarian in one of the great cities. More than one Brown sister is going to have made contact. Like,
that's a good point. Yeah. That's, like, where they go.
Yeah, I mean, basically, this dude is Google. If Google was a guy, he would live in Camelin.
Right, because, like, I'm sure they probably started correspondence asking for stuff in the books themselves. And then it's not that hard to be like, by the way, what else is going on in town?
Right, totally. I mean, he could be an individual agent for multiple Aes Sedai who don't realize he's agenting for other Aes Sedai because that's such an obvious, logical, like, hey, can you look up a reference for me? Also, what's the weather like today? And, 30
and
years
also,
later...
what's the Queen doing?
Right, and then 30 years later, he's like, basically all I do is look at books and write reports, and I get paid really well, and that's fun. And then Rena Hartford, like, upsets the apple cart. Looking for someone completely different.
Strangles the golden goose.
Yeah. Anyway.
I still don't know what those sisters in the Silver Swan are doing, is what it boils down to.
They're Googling really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, this line, there's too much we do because Aes Sedai have always done it that way, but things are changing. No matter who believes it will all go back to how it was. You're so
hear that,
close,
Sanderson?
Egwene.
You hear that?
You're so close.
Yeah. And it's so true. But, like, who was it? Nablus was pointing out that, like, Romaine has been around since the founding of the U.S. as far as lifetimes. So it's like, I can see why they are so stuck in the mud and hidebound. Yes, very much. But it's also like, oh, Egwene, why did you go farther, Egwene? Just go farther with that.
And again, if we're talking about how do we determine hierarchy, it doesn't make sense to do it like we do with power. How do the wise ones do it? I don't know, but it makes more sense than what we're doing, because what we're doing doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, at all. I mean, you could do literally the opposite of what you're currently doing, and it would make more sense than what you're currently doing. Like, ugh. Whoever can't learn to change or won't had better learn to live with it.
So then she's just looking out the window, looking for a reason to go, I think, and she sees Myrelle.
Well, she's looking for a reason to distract Swan from being melancholy. Because she's, like, there's this line here, like, Egwene's throwing down her pen and thinking, like, you kept going, and now you're losing your will? Which I think it's just Swan's having a bad moment. I don't think she's really losing her will long term. It's just, today is not going well.
And we haven't seen this conversation, but Swan has told Egwene that Myrelle is up to something, but she's not sure exactly what.
Right.
That she's, like, doing things outside the camp, and, like, there's definitely some weird, suspicious stuff going on. Also, her treatment of Nynaeve was really weird, and we talked about that at length.
Yes. But yeah, that's why she chooses now to go after Myrelle. Is because Swan is down in the dumps. Like, this conversation could have happened anytime.
But she's like, hey, Swan, let's go track down those secrets you've been keeping track of and see what's really going on here.
Right, because that's Swan's dopamine, is uncovering secrets.
Solving puzzles.
Yeah, catching people out in their own lack of cleverness.
She's the kind of person who would look at voting numbers and be able to see where people were cheating just based on, like, statistics.
Yeah, she'd spot gerrymandering real quick.
Absolutely, yeah, real quick.
She's probably really good at making it happen, too. And Swan just gets it intuitively. She's like just naturally like looks at things and it pops out in statistical shapes to her eyes. It's you get a little more of how that works for her in New Spring, but even just here you don't need to know how it works. You just know that it works. She's a savant at spotting this kind of stuff in data.
And you can prove that with statistics. And like it's one of those things where like you look at the numbers and you're like, yeah, that was stolen. Like there's no question in my mind. You don't need to do anything other than look at the numbers and where people voted and how they voted.
Statistics are so fascinating because if you know what you're talking about, even in the slightest little bit, you can spot bullshit a mile away. But if you don't have at least a few weeks of trying to get this stuff, then like any kind of bullshit can get pulled over your face with numbers. Like lies and statistics is born from a very real place of frustration.
Very.
And yet, sometimes it's the only way to spot really obvious shit. So Egwene yells at Myrell. Swan ignores Bryn.
Yeah, there's a lot of things coming together at once. Like, Lord Brent arrives, Myrell arrives, and then Lelaine and Ramonda all... Like, everyone sort of converges on this spot within, like, 30 seconds.
It's like, oh, Egwene's out of her tent for the morning. Quick, everyone make a beeline to her. She's like, I have not even finished my coffee. Go away.
This is sort of like my worst nightmare, where it's like, there's someone else always clamoring for your attention as soon as you're done with one thing. There's someone else being like, now me. And it's like, no, you wait, now you. It's like, feels a lot like orders coming in the restaurant.
Mm-hmm. And the whole thing where, like, Ramonda and Lelaine are, like, not even letting her get in a word in edgewise because they're too busy fighting over who's going to get to dominate the conversation. Like, it just...
Mommy and Daddy are fighting.
So infuriating. And, like, and everyone else in the whole camp is like, we're not looking. We don't see that conflict. Nope. Because, yeah, like, the aunties are fighting. Like, run away! Of course, Bryn's like, I'm going to pay attention to everything except Swan. I'm definitely not looking at Swan. Swan's like, yeah, I didn't notice you not looking at me. Nope.
Yeah, those two are so in love.
So annoying.
Why is Gareth Bryn there? He's there. She said, "There's one of my patrols found something just before dawn. Something I think you should see for yourself."
He takes her to see the there's a caravan that was coming down from Andor, and they have news of the rumor that Rand has gone to Tar Valon and sworn to Elida. So it's not that he wants her to see something; it's that he wants her to physically know the news before everyone else. So he's able to tell her on the road, looking at the caravan.
Because this is where our timeline is so compressed. We're getting news of Rand being captured, even though Dumais Wells has happened, and he's free again.
Right.
Right now, all they're getting is the news of him being captured.
Because what we were talking about last time was that meeting where the Aiel, agree to Egwene's demands is the night after Dumais Wells. So this is the next day, and Egwene tells Bryn, like, oh, yeah, no, don't worry about the rumors. That's ridiculous. Like, I just last night learned that Rand is fine. And it's like...
Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not wrong, but, like, you're wrong.
You sort of time skipped from that whole, like, the news of him being captured arrived on the same day you learned that he got freed, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that the rumor would have been this far along. Because he's only been captured... for like 10 days. He's only been out for like 2 days. Like, how are there rumors about how the battle ended already? But with a merchant train? I guess that's RJ's thing, though. It's like, rumors move through many weird ways. Yeah. So,
you get a raven to the tower up to Camelin, or from a raven from into Camelin would be easy, and then the caravan travels down from there. They're only a couple of days out, right?
Oh, well, they're 10 days military marching from the border with Camelin, or from the border with Andor. I can't imagine that a merchant train goes that much faster than an army. So I'm not totally sure that us or RJ knows what the real timeline is here. or maybe, it was the information was not moving in a steady fashion. It could have jumped around. I don't quite understand that, but that's what he wanted her to see, was the merchant train that was bringing this rumor that could be really problematic for the Aes Sedai, and he didn't want any other Aes Sedai to know before her.
Maybe we can investigate that a little further in the next chapter.
Yeah, I think we'll have to. But that's why he's there. Morel's there on accident, and Ramonda and Lelaine were probably stalking Egwene. And then they also bring along with them Takima and Varolin, who are incredibly unimportant characters that we will see repeatedly.
Did I even look them up?
I didn't. They're both sitters. They both show up in crowds of Aes Sedai that have to say things and have little one-liners, but neither of them do anything particularly notable. I think Takima might give us some pretty good lore drops about Tower Law and channeling in some Hall of the Tower scenes.
So basically, they're there to complain about Delana, because Delana has been being Black Aja and stirring up all sorts of weird trouble, trying to have the Hall declare Elida as black, which is just a typical Black Sister move.
Yeah, I know, right? It's when people scream really loudly about something, they usually have very personal ties to that problem.
And I feel like this is all very much like setting us up to be like, so when we go back and read this and we realize Delana's black, we know Delana's black. Like, that's the thing, is like, we've had that reveal. So we know that this is shenanigans going on.
But it gives us a chance to observe what happens when nobody else knows, right? We get the God's eye view, and nobody else in the situation has the God's eye view at all.
That's a good point, yeah. It's rare that we do actually get to see the Dark Friend in action as Dark Friend.
And to get to not be in someone's POV, right? Like, usually we have the unreliable narrator thing going on. This is a rare time where we actually get the more reliable, omniscient narrator, which is kind of cool. Not narrator, but perspective.
The Black Aja seemed their only fixed point.
Yeah, think?
Yeah, think? Black as hell.
Yeah. And also notice, her head hurts this whole chapter. Egwene keeps wanting to rub her head. Next chapter, too. She has a headache the entirety of these 2 chapters, and it just gets worse and worse and worse until Halima shows up at the end of the next chapter and, like, massages it away. But this whole time, she keeps circling back to, like, oh, my head. Okay, right, politics. Oh, my head. Okay, right, interpersonal drama. Oh, my head.
I didn't even notice one head reference in this whole chapter.
Oh, my God, there's several. Yeah, it happens at least 3 times, I think.
I totally believe you. It's funny how your eyes can skip over stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't notice how much the chair was important, you know. We get a little bit of foreshadowing for one of the ways to dig out the Black Aja that the Black Aja hunters in the tower use, kidnapping women and torturing them into swearing the oaths again. Gets hinted at here, like, well, that's a ridiculous solution. And it's like, but it works.
Kind of does.
It will work in just a, handful of weeks along the story timeline.
And foreshadowing, I mean, that is essentially what they end up doing. Even once Egwene has the book, everyone has to swear the oaths. Yeah,
she gets to skip the kidnap and torture part of the plan.
But isn't she just basically like, you re-swear the oaths or you get executed?
Yeah, but, the way that this is being proposed is one at a time. Whereas when Egwene does it, she calls everyone into the tent and says the doors are locked. That's what's happening now.
And that's where Ramonda's I will be the first to submit to my methods, Leanne, if you are the second. And it's very much like reading this the first time, there's no way to know what they're talking about. But yeah, I agree. It's the oath rod, having everyone re-swear oaths.
And there's a chair of remorse part that happens in the tower that probably isn't in Ramonda's plan, but...
Yeah, could be.
Since they don't have it, I suppose. Oh, that's the other thing. They can't do any of this unless they're willing to travel into the tower and get the rod. So just torturing people until they admit that they're dark friends is not going to work very well.
But that's why Ramonda's saying desperate days demand desperate actions. I think the desperate action is traveling to the tower and getting the oath rod and using it.
I always figured it was just the desperate actions of torturing your fellow colleague. But, I mean, yeah, there is a lot being unsaid there. We don't get the discussion about how afraid they are of using a gateway to get into the tower until later. But there's no reason to think that they aren't already thinking that through. And I'm thinking of the discussion about, like, taking the army in. And I assumed that was the first time we actually see that discussion. But it might not be. We might have actually seen it before.
I thought there was a discussion when she was being released where she's like, oh, I wish I had the oath rod. And I thought about going in with a gateway, but it's too risky to give the tower gateways. It's one of our few advantages.
Yeah, that sounds right. And then desperate days call for desperate measures. Like, yeah, that could totally be what they're talking about. But then they do this whole, like, old lady almost cat fight thing that I'm just like...
Skipping right over it.
It makes me think that they're both dark friends trying to throw Egwene off the scent. It's so petty and nonsense. Like, you're 400 years old. Act like it.
It does make more sense why they believe what Suan and Leanne are going through.
Which I just... it's so short-sighted for anyone to be believing that bullshit from Swan and Leanne. It's so bullshit that Ramonda and Lelaine actually appear to be doing it such that they will believe that bullshit.
It's one of the few things I really give Elida credit for. She is one of the only people who remembered that Suan and Moraine were childhood friends.
Right?
Like that. She's a clever woman.
Yeah.
Wrong-headed and bullheaded to the point where her own beliefs ruin her analytical thoughts, but, like, she is smart.
And these two are supposed to be smart. They've been sitters forever and ever, and yet, like...
I would say they're probably more hidebound than smart.
Will never not raise my blood pressure. So yes, we can skip past it now that I've yelled about it for a minute. Next thing I have is from Egwene being like, when you have decided what I should say, then I can decide what to do.
That was my favorite line. They're traveling through the tents. The soldiers, there's no real tents.
Another mention of her head hurting. Egwene felt a sense of relief as they rode away, yet her head seemed to be splitting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but yeah, I literally have, like, almost nothing highlighted for 2 pages. Like, it's just, like, then she yells about not having Bella.
Description of the camp.
Descriptions of Brynn. Mm-hmm. Descriptions of Swan being a bad horsewoman. And then the timeline thing about where the border is coming up. This military discussion.
At the tail end of Kumbar Hills, somewhat south of Lugard, the capital of Murundi. So they're going to keep traveling through Murundi until they get to the border, and then 10 days they stop at the end of the border of Murundi and Camelin, stay there for a month, and then travel to the White Tower.
And that's not necessarily a fully fleshed out plan yet, but it will be very shortly.
Within 10 days. And then, so we get a little discussion about taking the tower. He talks about blocking the port as being the important thing. He thinks he's going to do it with ships. We know that leads to the Quendiar chain.
Yeah.
And Egwene being captured, which is that. Like, there's so much setup in this chapter for Egwene's storyline until the reunification of the tower. The next couple of books are all set up in this chapter. This is all just like... I feel like this is Jordan putting the pieces on the board for that game.
Yeah, because he sets up why Tar Valon is so hard to attack, why Arthur Hawken couldn't do it. If you can block the harbors, Brynn says it because Brynn's a tactician. If you can block the harbors, I can do it. And I don't think that Egwene has the Quendiar chain thing thought out until this moment or later.
So you're telling me Brynn knows how to find North Harbor? Must be why Suan likes him.
He's been around the block. he was with the queen for a while. I'm sure there were some geography lessons administered.
The question is, what is he doing around the South Harbor? That's
Nobody talks about South Harbor.
Definitely not as clean as North Harbor because, you know, the river flows north to south, right? And so you get the fresh water coming in the north, and then the South Harbor has a lot more of that, like, city detritus.
Eddies.
Sort of. Eddies. Yeah, there's a lot of...
There's a wake.
Exactly.
Was it you or someone else who was recently blowing my mind about how big the island of Tarvallen is?
Somebody else.
Okay, yeah, must be one of the... I think it was Tarvallen After Dark, because Brian lives in New York. And they were talking about the size of Tarvallen. It's described as being on par with Manhattan Island. So, like, a lot of the fan art, it makes the tower, like, the central single building, but, like, does the Empire State Building really overshadow Manhattan Island that much? It's big, but...
I mean, what about when it was the only skyscraper on the entire island?
Well, okay,
when the next tallest building is 3 stories. Like, that's the real issue, is, like, the White Tower is so tall, not necessarily because it's that tall, right? It's not, in our modern-day standards, it's not that big of a building.
Well, the whole city is Ogier built, and they've got the towering sky bridges and all of that magic, but it was just... I think of it as being like, you know, a few miles of island, and it's more like a few dozen. It's just like, well, add a 0 to all those measurements. Because Manhattan Island's actually pretty big.
Is it size equivalent to Manhattan Island?
That's what Brian was saying. I don't remember if that's super accurate.
Seem to recall that being canon.
Also, that's a really big island. That's a really big river that got displaced to make that island. Like, that is not a little putt-putt river. Though it is described as being a couple miles across. So, yeah.
It's a big river.
It's a really big river.
I mean, you consider, it crosses the entire continent. It goes all the way up from the waist, all the way down to the Tears of the Dragon, the Fingers of the Dragon, the Delta. It's the Mississippi.
Yeah, it's like the Mississippi. It's ginormous. It's draining, like, most of a continent.
Yeah, basically all the rivers that don't go to the east or the west coast are draining.
There's some really gorgeous maps out there of the watersheds of North America, or of the Americas, and yeah, the Mississippi is like, wow, you really do get most of this continent, don't you?
Yeah, it really does, yeah. And basically, if you're on this side of the Rockies, you pretty much go to the Mississippi.
Other side of the Rockies.
That side, yeah, I'm not on the East Coast anymore.
It's because you're in space.
So yeah, so she asks about when you reach Tar Valon, how do you plan to take the city? Also, he says, I hope to gain 3 times as many soldiers on the march from here to there. And she says, and if you don't have that many soldiers, which to me implies that she's thinking about skipping the distance.
She's got the idea of a lag. She's just not sure exactly where it's going to happen. But she's like, please tell me we don't have to march the entire way, because I need a pause at some point.
And also, I can just skip the intervening space and surprise them, right? That is a huge tactical advantage to be able to do that.
Right, which, like...
But pop out of nowhere.
Yeah, and it makes sense that Bryn's strategy doesn't include that yet, because he hasn't been told that that's a tool he can use.
Talk to your generals, people, please. The lack of communication between the Hall and Gareth Bryn drives me up a wall.
Yes.
And it's why he's so loyal. One of the reasons he's so loyal to Egwene is she communicates with him. And, like, that's all he wants.
Yeah.
Someone to respect him as a person and as a general and as an individual communicator.
And yes, Swan and Egwene are the only ones who even try to extend confidence to him. They're the only ones who are like, man, if I could trust him a little more, he'd be even more useful. Let's see what I can do. All the other Aes Sedai are just like, ugh, men. For
some reason, it's Swan's first thought. There's that scene when they discover Elida has gateways, and the first thing she does is pop off, and Egwene's like, where are you going? She's like, I'm going to go tell General our biggest tactical advantage has just been undermined. Mm-hmm. And that's her first thought, is immediately for Gareth Bryn.
Oh, it's for the tactics. It's for the tactics. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They've had that advantage for weeks now. Like, if they were coming, they would have come, you know?
Well, it's the first time they've heard of it. Oh, yeah, and here's that other line that made me think about the population. Tar Valon is larger than Cairhien and Caemlyn together. Again, I think of Tar Valon as like Vatican City. Like this like little itty-bitty. No! It's a huge nation state!
And in a lot of ways, it's probably the only nation that currently is able to survive off external supplies. A lot of the other cities have to survive off of like the local area around them.
Right.
But Tar Valon is in such a high-trafficked area, both from the north and the south, plus, you know, the plains around them, that I'm guessing most of the supplies are shipped in.
Right, well, and I mean, they get tribute, right? Like,
yeah, they get tribute, they can... So that, you know, Tar Valon has money, so they can buy things. Like, they don't need to be really a generator of anything, because they generate the one power, and they're a trade hub.
So it's an entirely urban population, also. You don't have any farmers, aside from, like, the cheese towns around the edges.
Right. The suburbs.
Yeah, but the city itself is populated entirely by, like, urban dwellers.
Craftsmen and people, you know, because think about all the people who serve the Aes Sedai, and they get a lot of gold, and then they need to go out and spend that gold on fancy things, and you got the nicest buildings, and rent goes up, so it becomes expensive to live there. So, like, it's just this cycle of New York. Like, New York is such a great analogy. Manhattan is such a great analogy for Tar Valon. Like, expensive real estate.
People who think they're better than everyone else.
High-paying jobs. People who think they're better than everybody else. Big towers with assholes' names on them. Elida.
Yeah, and then Egwene's like, oh, civilians are going to get hurt by my siege of a giant city with a population of millions. I never thought of that. I'm like, I know you're 18 and have a lot on your plate, but really? You never thought about civilian casualties?
That does seem a little... I mean, she's had a lot on her plate, but that does seem to be something that, like, in the whole discussion, she would have thought about before. Well, I think she just doesn't want to, like... She doesn't want to start a war.
Yeah.
She's still a little bit in that Aes Sedai sort of bloodless coup, we can all just sweep this under the table and maybe no one has to die idea.
And I think she's thinking of the battle as, I'm going to make men swing sharp metal at each other rather than have Aes Sedai hurl the power at each other. And that's her entire focus.
Yeah, there's no way to have the Aes Sedai battle it out.
But she's not thinking about siege. I mean, I don't think about siege usually when I think about warfare. Like, sieges are not high up on my list. I think of the cavalry running at each other, right? Like, sieges, they're not as glamorous, so I can kind of forgive her, but it's also like, you're trying to be in charge of a military machine. Maybe think about these things.
Quote, being in the military is about 50% marching, 49% waiting, and 1% sheer terror. Hopefully, if your commanders do the right thing, it's all posturing and no one has to die.
Yeah, and that concept comes up in this series like several times from several different military discussions that happen. Like, yeah.
And that's why it's, you know, when you're starving, it's a good deal to join the army. It's like 99% of the time, you're just marching and eating and sleeping and waiting. And like that's...
Trying not to get scurvy.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And in this world, when, you know, there's no other source of food, that seems like a good idea. But the payment is then that 1% of the time you could die.
Yeah.
And that's a risk.
Yeah. The whole, like, die or risk dying thing is like, oof. That's not a great set of choices.
Assuming your life is a baseline level of risk that you don't, I can assume that I'm not going to have my life in danger tomorrow. But if I did, joining the army might sound like a better idea.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a refugee running away from an army and then one side turns around and says, hey, if you grab a weapon, you won't be a refugee anymore, you can be a soldier. Like, I mean, yeah, who's going to say no to that when you're starving? I guess it's just, yeah, Egwene's got a lot going on, so she hasn't thought about how rough a siege is going to be. And I mean, in fairness, Brynn is making sure she's getting this information dripped to her before she has to make decisions on a battlefield. So he's doing his job as a mentor, right? To be like, by the way, this is a thing.
And I think on that note, I kind of want to read us out on that sort of sentiment.
Okay.
Because that last paragraph addresses what you were pretty much saying. Egwene felt ill. She had seen war. Images flashed in her head. Men fighting, killing their way through the streets of Tarvallen. Dying. Her eyes fell on a square-jawed fellow chewing his tongue while he sharpened a pikehead. Would he die in those streets? The grizzled, balding man running his fingers so carefully down each arrow before sliding the shaft into his quiver. And there, that lad swaggering in his high riding boots. He looked too young to shave. Light, there were so many boys. How many would die? For her, for justice, for the right, for the world. But at the heart, for her. Suan raised her hand, but did not complete the gesture. Had she been close enough, she could not pat the emerald seat on the shoulder where everyone could see. Egwene straightened her back. Lord Brynn, she said in a tight voice, what is it you want me to see? She thought he half-glanced at Myrelle before answering. Better to see it for yourself, mother. Egwene thought her head might break open. If Suan's clues led to anything at all, she just might skin Myrelle. If they did not, she might skin Suan. And she might throw Gareth Brynn in for good measure.
She's hurting. Her one ally in this, and she's like, I'm just gonna, you too, because
yeah. Could something please go my way?
Yeah, no, it's rough. She gives us a chance to really be horrified by war and understand the necessity for it at the same time. In a way that Rand, I think, buries it too much. Egwene feels the conflict.
And you're pointing out it's unrealistic that she hadn't thought about this before, especially being her experience with the Shan-Chan. I mean, maybe unless she was blocking out the trauma and just deliberately not thinking about battle.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like she usually sees war in terms of its aftermath. She hasn't ever been part of watching an army come to besiege her over the horizon or being in a besieging army.
Was she not there during Falma?
That wasn't weeks of waiting for a siege to happen and then enduring a siege. That was one afternoon of shit hitting the fan. Like, the wars that we've seen in the books so far, there really hasn't been a lot of siege warfare. I guess there was, like, kind of how Couladin and the Shido fucked over Kyrian, but, like...
The Stone could have had a big siege, but that didn't happen.
Yeah, if the Stone had, like, not been taken over before it realized it was under attack.
I mean, let's be honest, the One Power kind of eliminates the siege tactic quite a bit. Like, it's just, walls don't keep out Rand or Demandred or...
And that's why cannons are such a huge revelation or invention. It's because now you can take down city walls and eliminate a siege in a few days.
Right. In our world, that was cannons eliminated walled cities.
Yeah, exactly. And we see that happen here. It's just sieges, they have a very limited utility based on the weaponry of your enemy.
But yeah, starve the people out, take them over. Fortunately, that doesn't happen. I think it's one of the reasons why we're like, okay, great plan.
Yeah.
Thank goodness that, like, Egwene is able to take down the tower from the inside.
Yeah, we end up seeing a lot more of the siege dynamics play out with Caemlyn in the last battle. That's where we really get to see a lot of this playing out in its fullness. It really doesn't apply to the battle for Tarvallen.
Well, and how long is the siege of Tarvallen? Any ideas? It can't be super long. I mean, 5 weeks until in the last battle. Couple months, maybe?
At most?
Yeah.
Like, Egwene's entire imprisonment in the tower is, like, a month?
Because isn't she, like, 3 days in the hole?
Yeah. But she was around for several weeks before that. And they're at siege at I feel like one of the books we open up with Elida, and she mentions it's been a couple weeks since the army showed up out of nowhere. So they've got to be there for, like, 2 months-ish. I don't think much longer than that. But they're there long enough to, like, really grind in, like, paths and have mud be an issue and It's not the place where they talk about paving the streets, because that's Salidar, but they definitely get their little paths worked in pretty well. And you've got the whole the camp followers that have their whole ring, and then the Shamaran shows up. There's time. There's a lot of time there. But it's not really much like a siege, because Tarvallen still has a lot of food. They have traveling.
Yeah, and Egwene never really blocks... I mean, this is the thing. As he has to block the harbor for this to work, and they don't.
Well, they block 1.5 harbor. And that half a harbor is enough to pretty much negate the siege. And then they know that the tower has gateways at that point. So it's like, even if you had blocked both the things, like, they could be supplying themselves with gateways.
Which is what the army is doing.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause that's actually, in the beginning, that really messes with Elida, where she's like, how are they getting supplies? Doesn't make any sense. Like, there's no supply train. Like, they couldn't have come all this way. What the hell? Like, how did the army jump this distance?
Right. And that's right around when she's being taught how to make gateways. Oh no, she doesn't get taught how to make gateways until after the army shows up, because it's when Maidani defects, and that's only after Egwene gets captured. And then she doesn't share that with the rest of the tower, so I think they're just working off of their stored food while Egwene destroys them.
Well, we know Alviarin knows how to make gateways from Masana. I thought Elida did teach a few people how to make gateways.
I think she does, but she doesn't make it like a tower policy to be like bringing in food. So it's probably mostly what's coming in through the South Harbor that's not totally blocked, or North Harbor. I forget which one Lyanna does versus Egwene, but
South Harbor was blocked. North Harbor was only partially successful. Figures South Harbor should be usually blocked.
That makes sense. Okay, so Manhattan Island is 13 by 2, and you're saying Tar Valon is 8 by 2. So it's the same width, but quite a bit shorter.
Right.
Undoubtedly, it's less built up than Manhattan.
Just because the Tower of Tarvallen, being the tallest structure in the world and much taller than anything else, is not that tall.
Yeah, it's like, 80 stories, I think? Me half saying 600 feet.
Yeah, 600 feet.
Oh, same height as the Space Needle, apparently. So tall, but yeah, not...
So that's about a 55-story building.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Man, from the way that the Aes Sedai bitch about climbing all the stairs, I would have figured it was more.
I mean, 55 stories to get to the Amerlin's office, that's a lot of stairs when you have no elevator.
Yeah,
Like,
that's true.
most buildings require an elevator if there's more than 3 floors.
That's
and this
true.
is 10 times, on a different order of magnitude than that. Like,
Yeah.
that's a lot of stories. That's a lot of steps.
Yeah, but they don't all live on the ground floor. A lot of them are starting out, they're given missions some amount up.
I know, I'm just saying, like, that is a lot of... that. Go climb 10... Like...
No, you're right. I'm thinking...
When I worked on... I want to say, like, the 12th story or something of a building here in Portland, we'd occasionally, like, walk up the stairs after doing something, and that was rough. Like, I had to sit down and catch my breath after 12 stories. Like, it's... a lot of steps are hard.
Yeah, no, that's fair. When I worked at the library, I had to take the elevator all the time because I was pushing, a cart full of books, and they don't go well on stairs. Shockingly. But sometimes I would have reason to go up to the top floor, and I'd be like, aha, a chance to use the stairs instead. And 6 stories, I was sweating and well into my cardio, like, workout by the time I got to the top. Like, I was fine. I wasn't, like, dead, but I was like, okay, good, I'm glad there's only 6 floors.
Now do that 10 times.
Yeah, okay, that's exhausting. Even on the way down, like, fighting gravity that many stairs is hard.
Hurt your knees? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and Elida's up there on the top, right? She's making everyone come up to her. That's
Yeah,
what I know.
she's like 3 stories below the tippity top. Because, like, the Amerlin's study is, like, probably around floor 30, and then she moves up into, like, floor 40 or something, so she can... Yeah, so much arrogance to build herself a palace taller than the tower. Like, where did you even get the confidence for that? Yeah, MK, run now while you can. Because we are talking about Aes Sedai machinations, and it's going to be fascinating. So I'm like staining my book with like sweating into it and like leaking the ink out. It's disgusting. I like clutch my book way too much.
Wait, so the sweat from your hands is like staining? Yeah.
It's like, I don't know if you can see it, but it's like there's a dark section.
It keeps getting filtered out by your...
But yeah, I hold it like that, and it's just... I need to learn to like... But the problem is that the afternoon sun's coming in, the computers are running, and I'm performing. So, like, I am sweating. I'm running hot. So I either have to not touch the book, or I have to destroy the book with my sweat.
I mean, these books are battered as hell by the time we get to the end of a full book worth of episodes.
I've never destroyed a Wheel of Time book for the podcast before.
That actually, looking at it, it's in very good shape for the amount of time you've spent on it so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I like the digital books. I don't feel like I'm destroying anything.
Yeah, I just don't like how you can't, like, flip through a digital book. I can't just be like, this page, and then this page, and then this page. It's like, scroll.
One of the things I'm very good at, though, with the digital book is the searching for a term or a phrase. And so sometimes I can very quickly get to a phrase that I'm looking for, even if I don't know exactly where it is, without flipping through pages. Also, the other thing I really like it for is... when I have a digital book and the Encyclopedia Watt, which is just a listing of events and then where they happen, so often I know a character or something, and I can just scroll through that character until I find the chapter that I'm looking for, go to that chapter, do a quick search for a phrase that I know is in what they're saying, and I can have a quote in, what feels like 10 seconds, compared to looking through a paper book, which is going to take me who knows how long.
Yeah, for sure. So. Me and digital books have never really hit it off quite right, which sucks, but...
I invested a lot of time in acquiring ebooks of all of my paper books when I moved to Portland, or before I moved to Portland, and I was reading on my, original iPhone. I was able to get, I don't even remember what app I was using. It definitely there wasn't iBooks or anything like that. It was like one of those primitive ebook readers. It was really nice because I had all these ebooks, and I was reading constantly. I was reading so much more than I used to. And then something broke in my brain, and I kind of stopped reading, and I mostly started listening to audiobooks.
Yeah.
And now I don't have any paper books, and I don't really pick up my digital reader very often either, so... most of my digital books that I'm doing with Wheel of Time, I'm doing it on my computer in iBooks, is what I'm doing all this work in.
It's still weird to me to read these books physically after however many iterations through the series I've done only audio. It's like, words on a page in Wheel of Time. What?
I got vaccinated yesterday. I think I've said that before, but make sure it happens on recording. I've got my second vaccine.
Woohoo!
So, yay. Everybody go get vaccinated, please. I have 0 symptoms 24 hours later.
And even if you
feel
did,
great.
it's not COVID.
It's not COVID. So, it was easy, fun. Go do it. I can't wait to go out and resume life, especially at JordanCon.
That's super exciting.
I also wanted to say, I haven't gotten the list of patrons up yet, but I did want to say a huge thank you to all the people who've been supporting us. I've seen a lot of people and a lot of names pop up since we asked for some help on episode 350.
Thanks, everyone!
So I just really, really appreciate everyone who's reached out and provided financial help since then. That's been a huge boon and has really helped motivate me over the last couple of weeks, so thank you.
Yeah, that was 6 episodes ago that we put that call out. So that's awesome that the turnaround was so quick. Or immediately see a uptick. That's great.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?